Welcome. I'm Mayor Gary Sulz, and with me today is Taha Attiah, Community Development Co-ordinator with the City of Revelstoke's Community Economic Development Department. Today, Taha and I are discussing the recently released Living Wage Update Report and what it means for residents of Revelstoke. Taha, can you give me a bit of background on what the Living Wage Report is and how the numbers in the report are calculated?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gary. And about the living wage, it's a campaign that's been running several years now. There's an organization called Living Wages for Families BC that puts it together. And then once a year, they go around and communities around BC will come up with the inputs, the costs that they can't quite figure out from their office in Vancouver and plug it into a spreadsheet and come up with a living wage that reflects what the cost of living in their community is.
So it's all really local, and that's why it's, the living wage based on what it costs us to operate in Revelstoke.
Yeah, it starts off with that generic kind of cost spreadsheet. So it plugs in all your taxes and what it costs on average for childcare, and then what communities do is they tend to pick up the local costs that really they can measure and figure out on the ground.
Okay, great, good. So what is Revelstoke's living wage this year, and how does it compare to previous years? Or how does it compare to other communities?
Yeah, good question. This year, the living wage is $23.60, and that's for a family of 2 adults and 2 children.
Okay.
So that's the way it's calculated. It obviously changes with different family dynamics or even a single person, but that's the measure that they use. And I guess, compared to previous years, it's a big jump from last year.
Yeah.
And one of the big reasons for that is that previous years, our rent in Revelstoke was it was measured by the census, which was a pretty, the 2016 census did a really comprehensive rent analysis, and that was pretty outdated. So we went out and measured, we went out and surveyed the community, and got about 500 responses, which is great. It was really helpful for calculating this year's living wage and getting it a lot closer to what the realistic cost of living is. So while it did jump a bunch, in part due to that, in part due to other things like the rising cost of food and gas and other things that are affected by events around the world, locally that was one of the big changes.
And so, we look at $23.60 per hour for the family of 4. Mm-hmm. How's that compare to, let's say, cities that are near us?
So we'll start with a community that's probably similar to ours, but not so close.
Right.
Fernie has a living wage that's only 2 cents off of us.
Okay.
And so they're comparable because they have an industrial base. They have mining in Fernie as their industrial base, but they have a growing tourism sector as well. So they're pretty comparable. One that's closer to us, but actually there's a big jump, was in Golden. And that's their living wage was around $25.50. And that jump of nearly $2 is in part due to the fact that they don't have a transit system. So they had to put in the cost for an extra car. Okay. And we worked pretty closely with them, and that came out to be $1.70 for that extra car an hour for two adults. So the fact that we have a transit system makes a huge difference in terms of affordability, and it can give us an idea of, the living wage can give us an idea of what kinds of inputs and what kinds of costs we can look at that affect affordability on the ground.
Okay. And so when we were to, I guess, compare the things that make up our living wage. So housing's a big thing, food's a big thing, transportation. Yeah. But food is second now because of the costs around the world, where before it was third or fourth or something. Yeah. Is that correct?
Yeah. That's a big jump. And then the last one I'd add in there is childcare. Okay, for this family, 2 children and childcare, that can come out to a pretty significant amount of their monthly costs. And Yeah, while that is a big cost, we're pretty lucky to have some programs in Revelstoke that have brought a number of families' costs for childcare way down. And this year, it looks like the province is going to put a lot more in place for that, which is going to make a big difference for families.
Yeah, I think that's really the key when I start hearing about people, what they're paying per month for childcare. It's almost, do we work or do we not work?
Yeah,
And that's a big, and if they're not working, then their whole scheme of being able to afford things just changes.
Yeah, not to mention the workforce shortage that we know is happening too.
Yeah.
That's affected by how easy or how hard it is to get out in the workforce.
Yeah. And so, as we move forward, I know that other communities are, while we're a little less, some are a lot more. It's more in Canmore, I think $32.75 per hour for Canmore. Different, basically demographic, different ways of doing it. So we really can't compare to that as, you're doing comparisons with what we can. But really, we need to look at what we can do here in our community to better our residents versus doing that comparison and speaking about that. It's like, okay, we know we're all in the same ballpark as far as wages go. Just what can we do? So, what initiatives really has the city undertaken to understand these impacts to our residents, Taha?
Yeah, that's really important. One of them that's going on right now is an update to the poverty reduction strategy, and that's really helping us understand in more depth what goes into alleviating poverty and having the cost of living really be supported in Revelstoke, and what initiatives can we take, what targeted kind of efforts can we make to reducing poverty for those families that are not making the living wage, or even families, individuals, people throughout the community who aren't whose costs of living are either out of reach given their income, or for whatever reason they're several reasons there could be for experiencing poverty.
Yeah, and from a mayor's perspective, really looking at things, what can we do to help those in our community so they can stay in our community, so they can afford to live in our community, because we need the people here to make community, to service our tourism, to service our own residents, that sort of thing. And so these are important things, I think, from our perspective, is how do we make all of this work together? And there's not an easy answer. It's not simplistic.
No, it's not simple. And another strategy maybe I'll bring up is the food security strategy.
Right.
That's really looking at where food comes from in the community, and how we get food into the community, and what we can do about that larger food system to support residents. So we can go all the way up to those big picture discussions about food systems, or about poverty, which is like a big concept, affordability, another big concept. But then it comes down to what we can do about it. And that there are decisions that we might be able to make locally, but there's also the chance times that we can, important opportunities, we can go and approach the provincial or the federal government for support. And we want to know exactly what we can ask for that's going to make the biggest difference for residents. So that's what understanding all those dynamics helps us with.
Okay, great. Yeah. Appreciate that. Anything else that you feel that the community should know, Taha, when we're talking living wage, talking poverty reduction? Is there anything that we should be, focusing on that people can do in their own world that's not only going to help them, but help us to understand what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, living wage wise, I think, this is a bigger discussion, and it's really good education for people to understand what the costs of living are, where their money can go, and how their wages affect their quality of life. It's also important to note that benefits and things that employers offer that aren't just wages can make a big difference in people's lives. So that's included in the living wage when you talk about a living wage employer. Right. And benefits, whether they're healthcare or, we're going to hear more about staff housing in Revelstoke, that can make a really big dent in someone's cost of living, which is really important. In terms of poverty, the cost of living has gone up really sharply over top of, a period of probably 10 years where it has been increasing too. So it's important to understand that when we're, looking around the community and really being compassionate of what we're seeing. On top of that, taking the opportunity to support where we can, whether it's our own efforts, going out and lending a hand to those organizations or even our neighbors where we can, and then beyond that, it's a season where we can really give where we want to think about giving. So going and donating when we have the opportunity to the food bank, to other initiatives is really important as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because that's really important. And I kind of look at it, and sometimes in the back of my mind I hear a mentor saying, "Are you going to pass up this opportunity to help someone else?" And I look at that and go, "Yeah, if we have the opportunity, I think we should all look at that and see what we can do."
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Thanks, Taha. I appreciate you joining me today. The living wage report really drives home how inflation and other costs are pushing up cost of living here in Revelstoke and across the province. So I want to say thanks to all of our audience for listening in. Be sure to watch our other videos on the City Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram accounts. We appreciate you paying attention to what we have to say and our discussions because we really think it's important for the community. Thanks again, Taha.
Thanks,
I really appreciate it. Thank you.